The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems before anyone bothered to answer. By then, the colony of New Geneva was nothing but ash and twisted metal floating in the void. 50,000 soldiers, gone, wiped out in 6 hours by something the Galactic Defense Force had never encountered before. Admiral stared at the holographic display showing the aftermath. Her 4 arms trembled as she processed the images. They had fought wars across the galaxy for 3. They had seen empires rise and fall, witnessed species extinct themselves through violence, and conquered worlds that imagination. But this was different. "Show me the tactical analysis again," she commanded, her voice echoing through the command center of the flagship Eternal Vigilance. The display shifted, showing the battle's progression in brutal detail. The attackers had appeared from nowhere. No ships, no energy signatures, just death moving through space like living shadows. They had torn through the defense grid in minutes, shredded the planetary shields like paper, and descended upon the surface with a hunger that comprehension. "The creatures appear to be biological in nature," reported Science Officer, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence as he accessed the data. "Carbon-based, but unlike anything in our databases, they move through vacuum as easily as atmosphere. Energy weapons seem to have minimal effect. Kinetic weapons slow them down but don't stop them." His mandibles clicked in frustration. 50,000 of the galaxy's finest soldiers. The 7th Armored Division had been stationed at New Geneva specifically because of their reputation. They had faced down the void wraiths of, held the line against the machine swarms of the Omega sector, and earned their place among the elite forces of the Galactic Defense Network. All of it meaningless against these creatures. "Have we identified their origin?" she asked. "Negative. They appeared approximately 47 light-years beyond the galactic rim. Initial scans suggest they've been traveling toward inhabited space for several months, but we have no data on their home system or motivation." The hologram shifted again, showing the creatures in detail. They were massive, each one roughly the size of a small frigate. Their bodies seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, but tactical analysis confirmed they were organic. Dozens of appendages extended from their central mass, each one capable of ripping through battle armor like it was made of foil. But it wasn't their size or strength that made Admiral's blood run cold. It was their intelligence. The attack on New Geneva hadn't been random or instinctual. It had been coordinated, strategic, efficient. The creatures had identified key defensive positions, neutralized communication networks, and systematically eliminated resistance in order of tactical priority. They were predators, but not mindless ones. They were hunters. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving an encrypted transmission from Sector Command." The display changed to show Fleet Admiral Eth, the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Force. His ancient features were grim, the weight of command etched deep into the scales around his eyes. He began without preamble. "The situation has escalated. 3 more colonies have reported similar attacks. The creatures are moving deeper into inhabited space, and conventional forces are proving ineffective." "What are our options, sir?" Eth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note that had never heard before. Fear. "We're authorizing the Mercy Protocol." The bridge fell silent. Every officer present knew what those words meant. The Mercy Protocol was the galaxy's last resort, a measure so extreme that it had never been officially implemented. It meant turning to the one species that most of the galactic community preferred to ignore, the one group whose methods were considered too brutal, too efficient, too final. It meant calling the humans. Humans had joined the galactic community only 2 centuries ago, arriving in ships that barely qualified as space-worthy by galactic standards. They were a young species, technologically primitive, politically chaotic, and utterly unremarkable in almost every measurable way. Their worlds were mostly quarantined, their military was considered amateur, and their diplomatic corps was largely viewed as an ongoing source of unintentional entertainment. But there was one thing humans did better than any other species in the galaxy. One thing that made even the most ancient civilizations step carefully around human space. Humans were the galaxy's premier exterminators. When a species needed to be completely eliminated, when a threat needed to be erased so thoroughly that not even genetic traces remained, the galaxy quietly contracted human mercenary companies. They called them rent killers in the trade languages, though humans themselves used cruder terms. The work was considered beneath the dignity of most civilized species, but humans approached it with an efficiency that bordered on artistic. The Terran Mercenary Guild has been contacted, Eth continued. They're sending their most effective unit, code designation Apex. Had heard of Apex. Every military officer in the galaxy had. They were the humans' elite extermination unit, a small group of specialists who had wiped out 17 different hostile species in the past 50 years. Their methods were classified, their technology was primitive, and their success rate was 100%. How long until they arrive? She asked. 12 hours. They're coming in fast on a human dreadnought. The ship is called Inevitable. Of course it was. Humans had no subtlety when it came to nomming their vessels of war. Inevitable, relentless, final answer, last word. They approached conflict with a directness that made most species uncomfortable. Admiral, interrupted the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the human ship. They're requesting tactical data on the creatures. Put them through. The display shifted to show a human face. Male, middle-aged by human standards, with the kind of scars that came from surviving things that should have killed him. His eyes were pale blue and completely empty of emotion. This is Commander Apex Unit. We understand you have a pest problem. The casual way he referred to the creatures that had slaughtered 50,000 soldiers made Scales bristle. Commander, these entities have proven resistant to all conventional weapons. They've destroyed 3 major colonies and eliminated an entire armored division. His expression didn't change. We've reviewed the tactical data. Standard biological apex predator adapted for vacuum operations. Not the worst thing we've dealt with this month. Not the worst, couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. Commander, these creatures are about to be extinct, interrupted. We'll need unrestricted operational authority in the affected sectors. No interference, no oversight, no questions about methods. The Galactic Defense Force maintains jurisdiction. Not anymore. His voice was flat, final. You called us because your people are dead and you can't stop what killed them. We can. But we do this our way, or we go home and you figure out how to explain to the Galactic Senate why half the Rim colonies are about to become feeding grounds. Looked to the image of Fleet Admiral Eth, who nodded grimly. Very well, Commander. You have operational authority. What do you need? Nothing. We brought our own tools. Glanced at something off-screen. ETA to the first target zone is 8 hours. Suggest you clear all friendly forces from a 50 light-year radius around the affected systems. We don't want witnesses, and we really don't want anyone trying to help. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Stared at the empty display, wondering what she had just unleashed. Humans were effective, but they were also unpredictable. Their methods often seemed to violate several fundamental principles of warfare, and they had a disturbing tendency to solve problems in ways that left other species questioning whether the cure was worse than the disease. But the creatures had killed 50,000 soldiers in 6 hours. All ships maintain position at the edge of the designated exclusion zone, she ordered. Monitor all communications, but do not interfere with human operations under any circumstances. Yes, Admiral. As her crew went about their duties, found herself thinking about humanity's rapid rise to prominence in the extermination industry. 2 centuries ago, they had been a single-world species struggling with basic space flight. Now they were the galaxy's go-to solution for problems that couldn't be solved through diplomacy, economics, or conventional warfare. The transformation had begun during the incident, when a previously unknown species had emerged from the galactic core and begun systematically destroying everything in its path. The creature's biological weapons had proven immune to all known countermeasures, and conventional forces had been rooted in every engagement. In desperation, the Galactic Senate had authorized contact with Earth, hoping that the humans' primitive but aggressive nature might prove useful in a last-ditch defense effort. What happened next had shocked the galaxy. Instead of joining the defense effort, the humans had asked for detailed biological scans of the attacking creatures. Within weeks, they had synthesized a targeted virus that didn't just kill the invaders. It unraveled their genetic structure at the molecular level. The species hadn't just been defeated. It had been deleted from existence so thoroughly that even there had become uninhabitable, the very soil poisoned against anything that shared their biological markers. The galaxy had been grateful, but also deeply disturbed. The speed and thoroughness of the human response had revealed something unsettling about their nature. Humans didn't just fight enemies. They studied them, understood them, and then crafted solutions designed to ensure that the problem could never arise again. In the 2 centuries since, human mercenary companies had built a reputation for solving the unsolvable problems. Species that seemed immune to conventional weapons, plagues that resisted all medical intervention, technological threats that adapted faster than countermeasures could be developed. Humans had answers for all of it. They also had a disturbing tendency to finish jobs more thoroughly than their employers expected. The collective had hired humans to eliminate a troublesome species of space-dwelling parasites that were interfering with shipping lanes. The humans had not only eliminated the parasites, but had somehow managed to render 3 entire star systems uninhabitable to any form of carbon-based life. When questioned, the human commander had simply stated that they had been thorough. The Crystalline Republic had contracted human services to deal with a recurring plague that kept evolving past their medical capabilities. The humans had indeed stopped the plague, but they had also introduced genetic modifications to the Republic's population that made them immune to all biological weapons, including their own. The long-term implications were still being debated in xenobiology circles. In every case, the humans delivered exactly what was promised: complete elimination of the threat. What they didn't advertise was their definition of complete. Push those thoughts aside as the tactical display updated with new information. The creatures had attacked another colony, this one in the Rigel system. The pattern was becoming clear. They were moving steadily toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each attack. "Admiral," reported the sensors officer, "we're detecting movement in the target zone. The human ship has arrived." The display showed a ship that looked like it had been built in someone's backyard and then upgraded by committee. It was roughly the size of a heavy cruiser, but its design followed no recognizable engineering principles. Weapons systems jutted from the hull at seemingly random angles, sensor arrays were mounted wherever they fit, and the entire vessel looked like it had been cobbled together from salvaged parts. But the energy readings were unlike anything in the galactic databases. The ship's power output suggested technology far beyond what humans were supposed to possess, and the weapons' signatures were completely unrecognizable. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," the communications officer reported. "Audio only. Put it through the general comm." Commander's voice filled the bridge, but he wasn't addressing them. He was speaking to the creatures. "Attention, unknown hostiles. This is Commander of the Terran Extinction Corps. You have been designated for complete biological termination. You have one opportunity to withdraw beyond galactic borders and never return. You have 30 seconds to comply." Found herself holding her breath. 30 seconds. The creatures had proven immune to negotiation, immune to threats, immune to everything except overwhelming firepower, and even that only slowed them down. The seconds ticked by. No response came from the creatures, who continued their systematic destruction of the Rigel colony's outer defenses. "Time expired," his voice continued, now carrying a note of something that might have been satisfaction. "Engaging primary protocols, all friendly forces maintain minimum 50 light-year distance." The human ship suddenly disappeared from sensors. For a moment, thought it had been destroyed. Then the tactical display began showing energy signatures unlike anything she had ever seen. Not weapons fire, not explosions, not even conventional energy discharges. The creatures were simply stopping. One by one, across a battle zone that stretched across half a star system, the massive predators ceased their attack and began drifting motionless in space. Within minutes, the assault that had been methodically dismantling the Rigel colony's defenses came to a complete halt. "Sensor report," ordered, her voice tight with disbelief. "All hostile entities have ceased movement and biological activity. They appear to be dead, Admiral." "All of them?" "Every single one within the star system. Over 300 individual creatures neutralized simultaneously." The display showed the battlefield in stark detail. Hundreds of massive predators, each one capable of single-handedly destroying a military installation, floating dead in space. There were no signs of physical damage, no energy weapon impacts, no evidence of kinetic strikes. They had simply stopped living. The human ship reappeared on sensors, exactly where it had been before. Rigel system secured, voice reported. Moving to secondary target zone, estimated time to complete extermination, 72 hours. Commander found herself saying, "What did you do to them?" There was a pause before responded. "We introduced them to the concept of mortality. Some species need to be taught that they're not as apex as they think they are." Second target system was 438, home to a mining colony of 12 million beings across 4 different worlds. When the creatures arrived, the local defense force had tried to evacuate as many civilians as possible. They managed to save roughly half before the predators reached the inner planets. Commander stood in the observation deck of the Inevitable, watching the creatures tear through the colony's orbital defense platforms like they were made of paper. His team was assembled around the central, each member reviewing tactical data with the kind of casual professionalism that came from years of making impossible problems disappear. "Biological analysis complete," reported Dr. Sarah, the units. She was a small woman with silver hair and the kind of intense focus that came from spending decades studying things that most species preferred not to think about. "These things are fascinating. Completely silicon-based physiology, but with organic neural networks that shouldn't be able to function in vacuum. Their genetic structure is unlike anything in galactic databases." Origin Point asked. "Definitely extragalactic. I'd say they've been traveling for at least 1,000 years, maybe longer. They're not just predators. They're biological weapons, engineered for maximum efficiency against carbon-based life." Technical specialist James looked up from his workstation. His cybernetic implants flickered as he processed data streams that would have overwhelmed most organic minds. "Energy patterns suggest they're drawing power from quantum vacuum fluctuations. That's why conventional weapons barely scratch them. They're literally feeding on the energy that's trying to kill them." "Weaknesses?" asked Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, the unit's tactical coordinator. She had been planning extinction events since before most of her colleagues were born, and her success rate spoke for itself. "Several," Doctor replied. "Their quantum energy absorption has limits. Overload them with enough simultaneous input, and their biological systems can't process it fast enough. They'll suffer cascade failures across their entire neural network." "Also," added, "their reproduction cycle is vulnerable. They need to consume specific genetic markers to reproduce. Remove those markers from local biology and they can't multiply." Nodded time frame for implementation. 12 hours to synthesize the necessary compounds, Doctor said. 6 hours to deploy across the target zone. Complete biological termination within 18 hours after initial deployment. "Do it." The team dispersed to their respective stations, leaving alone with his thoughts. Through the observation window, he could see the creatures systematically dismantling the colony's last defensive positions. Each predator moved with terrifying intelligence, adapting to defensive measures in real time and coordinating with the others to maximize damage. Most species would have seen them as unstoppable forces of nature. Humans saw them as a particularly interesting engineering problem. The approach was typically human. Where other species focused on building bigger weapons or stronger defenses, humans studied their enemies until they understood them better than the enemies understood themselves. Then they crafted solutions that didn't just defeat the threat. They erased the possibility of the threat ever existing again. It was an approach that made the rest of the galaxy deeply uncomfortable. SCOM unit chirped, "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral." "Put her through." The Admiral appeared on his personal display, her 4 arms gesticulating in what recognized as agitation. "Commander, we're detecting massive energy buildups in your ship systems. What exactly are you planning?" "Standard extinction protocols," replied. "We'll have the problem solved within 24 hours. "That's not what I'm asking. Our sensors show you're preparing to deploy some kind of biological agent. The Galactic Council has strict regulations regarding the use of biological weapons." His expression didn't change. "Admiral, with respect, those regulations were written by species that had never encountered a problem they couldn't solve with conventional methods. We weren't hired to follow galactic regulations. We were hired to eliminate a threat." "But the scale of what you're planning is exactly what's needed," interrupted. These creatures reproduce by consuming genetic material from other species. They're not just predators, they're genetic pirates. Every colony they attack makes them stronger and more adaptable. Surely there must be a more proportionate response. Was quiet for a moment, studying the Admiral's image. He had had this conversation before with dozens of different species, all of whom had hired humans to solve problems they couldn't handle themselves. The pattern was always the same. Hire the humans, watch them work, become horrified by their methods, and then enjoy the benefits of never having to worry about the problem again. "Admiral," he said finally, "how many soldiers have these creatures killed so far?" "Approximately 73,000 across all affected systems." "And how many civilians?" His mandibles clicked nervously. "Current estimates suggest around 22 million, with millions more at risk as they move deeper into inhabited space. In my experience, problems that kill millions of people require solutions that might seem disproportionate to those who haven't faced them before. The alternative is watching them kill millions more." The transmission ended, but knew the Admiral would be monitoring their every move. Most species found human methods disturbing precisely because they were so effective. There was something deeply unsettling about watching a problem that had seemed impossible to solve simply disappear. The humans had learned long ago that the galaxy was full of threats that couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be reasoned with, and couldn't be stopped through conventional means. The solution wasn't to build bigger guns or thicker armor. The solution was to understand the threat so completely that you could unmake it at the fundamental level. "Sir," Doctor's voice came through the comm, "we're ready to begin deployment." Walked to the main laboratory, where his team had assembled around a collection of devices that looked more like industrial equipment than weapons. Massive biosynthesizers hummed with energy, processing genetic templates at molecular speeds. Quantum field generators created localized distortions in space-time, allowing for precise manipulation of subatomic structures. To most observers, it would have looked like a cross between a medical facility and a physics laboratory. In reality, it was one of the most sophisticated extinction systems ever created. "Report," ordered. "We've synthesized a targeted retrovirus designed to disrupt the creature's quantum energy absorption," Doctor explained. "Once deployed, it will spread through their population within hours and cause complete systemic failure. No pain, no suffering, just cessation of biological function. Environmental impact: minimal. The virus is specifically keyed to their unique genetic markers. It can't affect any known galactic species and will break down naturally within 72 hours. Deployment method: gestured to a series of torpedo-shaped devices being loaded into the ship's launch tubes. Quantum penetration warheads. They'll phase through conventional matter and detonate directly inside the creature's biological matrices. 100% delivery guarantee. Reviewed the data on his personal display. The plan was elegantly simple. Deploy the modified virus directly into the creature's biological systems, wait for it to spread through their population, and watch the entire species experience synchronized biological termination. "Sir," Lieutenant Colonel Santos reported from the tactical station, "we have confirmation that the creatures have taken the bait at 4:38. They're moving in to consume the remaining civilian population." Perfect. The creature's predatory instincts would ensure that they remained concentrated in the target zone long enough for the virus to spread through their entire population. Within hours, every member of their species within 50 light-years would be extinct. "Begin deployment," ordered. The inevitable shuddered as the quantum penetration warheads launched. To external observers, nothing seemed to happen. The torpedoes simply vanished as they entered quantum phase, becoming invisible to conventional sensors as they passed through normal matter. But instruments tracked their progress with perfect precision. Each warhead found its target, phased back into normal spacetime inside a creature's biological matrix, and released its payload directly into their cellular structure. "Deployment successful," reported. "All targets have been infected, viral propagation beginning now." The effects were almost immediate. On the tactical display, the creatures began to slow their assault on the remaining colony structures. One by one, they stopped moving, stopped feeding, stopped existing. The viral cascade spread through their population like wildfire, jumping from creature to creature through their shared biological networks. How long until complete extinction? Asked. Approximately 4 hours for local population, Doctor replied. The virus will continue spreading to any members of their species within communication range. Based on their biological networks, we should achieve complete species extinction within 72 hours. Nodded, it was faster than usual, but not unexpectedly so. These creatures had evolved to share biological information across vast distances, which made them extremely efficient predators. Unfortunately for them, it also made them vulnerable to targeted biological weapons. Sir, the communications officer reported, we're receiving emergency signals from the other affected systems. The creatures there are experiencing the same biological failures. On the tactical display, could see the creatures throughout the galaxy beginning to die. Not just in the 438 system, but everywhere they had spread. The virus was propagating through their species' biological network faster than even his team had predicted. Within 6 hours, the last of the creatures had ceased biological function. An entire species that had threatened to overrun the galaxy had simply stopped existing. Confirmed extinction, Doctor reported. No remaining biological traces detected in any of the affected systems. The species has been completely eliminated. SCOM unit chirped with an incoming transmission from Admiral. Commander, her image appeared on his display. Our sensors confirm that all hostile creatures have been neutralized. How did you achieve complete elimination so quickly? Standard protocols, replied. We identified the most efficient termination method and implemented it. But the scope of the operation? You eliminated an entire species across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Yes. His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. Commander, do you understand what you've done? You've demonstrated the ability to eliminate any biological threat across galactic distances with minimal resources and no advance warning. The implications are exactly why you hired us, interrupted. Admiral, your people faced an extinction-level threat that was spreading faster than conventional forces could contain it. We solved the problem permanently. That's what we do. But the methods were necessary. These creatures were designed to be biological weapons. They couldn't be negotiated with, couldn't be contained, and couldn't be defeated through conventional warfare. The only solution was complete extinction. There was a long pause before spoke again. The Galactic Council will want a full report on your methods. They're welcome to it, though I doubt they'll understand most of the technical details. Quantum biology isn't exactly a common field of study outside of human space. Commander, I have to ask, how many other species have you eliminated using these methods? Considered the question. It was one he heard often, usually from species that were just beginning to understand the full scope of human capabilities. Admiral, in the past century, the Terran Extinction Corps has been contracted to eliminate 47 different species that posed existential threats to galactic civilization. In every case, we achieved complete biological termination with zero collateral damage to non-target species. 47 species, repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. 48 as of today, corrected. Admiral, the galaxy is a dangerous place. There are threats out there that most civilizations can't even conceive of, much less defend against. Humans specialize in problems that can't be solved through conventional means. And if someone decided that humanity itself was a threat? His expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Admiral, I'd suggest that anyone considering such an action review our track record very carefully before making any hasty decisions. The transmission ended, leaving alone with his thoughts. He knew that conversations like this were inevitable. Every species that hired humans eventually came to the same realization. If humans could eliminate any biological threat with such efficiency, what was to stop them from targeting anyone they chose? It was a fair question, and one that had shaped human policy for the past 2 centuries. The answer was simple. Humans didn't eliminate species for ideology, politics, or conquest. They eliminated threats. As long as a species didn't pose an existential danger to galactic civilization, they had nothing to fear from human extinction protocols. But the definition of existential threat was entirely at human discretion. The inevitable turned away from the 438 system, leaving behind a perfectly sterile star system where a thriving colony had been under siege just hours before. The colonists were already returning to their homes, the defense forces were standing down, and life was returning to normal. Except for the complete absence of one of the most dangerous predator species the galaxy had ever encountered. Reviewed the mission report one final time before transmitting it to Terran Command. Another successful extinction, another threat permanently eliminated, another demonstration of human efficiency in the art of making problems disappear. 48 species, each one eliminated completely, efficiently, and without collateral damage to non-target populations. It was a record that spoke for itself, and one that ensured continued contracts from species throughout the galaxy. Because no matter how uncomfortable they found human methods, they all knew one simple truth. When conventional solutions failed, humans delivered results. 3 weeks after the extinction of the galactic predators, Commander received an unexpected visitor. The inevitable had docked at Nexus Station, one of the largest commercial hubs in the galaxy, for routine maintenance and resupply. Was reviewing contracts in his quarters when his security officer announced that Ambassador Ash of the Collective was requesting an audience. Knew the name. Ash was one of the most influential diplomatic figures in the galaxy, representing a coalition of over 200 species. More importantly, he was known for his vocal criticism of human extinction methods. Whatever he wanted, it wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "Send him in," said. Ambassador Ash entered the room with the kind of measured dignity that came from centuries of diplomatic experience. They were an ancient species, tall and graceful, with skin that shifted between different shades of blue depending on their emotional state. Right now, Ash's skin was a deep indigo that suggested serious concern. "Commander," Ash began, his voice carrying the musical quality common to his species. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Ambassador, I assume this isn't a social call." "Indeed not." Ash settled into a chair that adjusted automatically to accommodate his physiology. "I'm here to discuss the recent extinction event in the 438 system. The predators have been eliminated. The threat is over. What's there to discuss?" Ash's skin shifted to a slightly darker shade. "Commander, what you and your team accomplished was remarkable. 48 hours from initial deployment to complete species extinction across dozens of star systems. The efficiency is unprecedented. We aim to please." "That's precisely what concerns me." Ash leaned forward. "Commander, the Collective has been monitoring human extinction operations for the past 50 years. We've observed a troubling pattern in your methods." His expression didn't change. "Which is?" "You don't just eliminate threats, Commander. You eliminate possibilities. When you target a species for extinction, you don't just kill the individuals currently alive. You ensure that the species can never evolve, never adapt, never find a way to return. You edit them out of existence at the fundamental level. That's the definition of extinction, Ambassador." "No, Commander, it isn't." Ash's skin was now a deep purple, indicating strong emotion. "Natural extinction leaves genetic traces, evolutionary pressures, ecological niches that other species can eventually fill. What humans do is different. You don't just kill species, you erase them." Was quiet for a moment, considering his response. This was a conversation he had been expecting for years, though he hadn't anticipated having it with someone of Ash's stature. "Ambassador," he said finally, "let me ask you a question. How many civilizations have fallen to threats that were thought to be permanently eliminated?" "I don't understand the relevance." "The hegemony of Or thought they had permanently eliminated the Shadow Plague 2,000 years ago. It came back and wiped out their entire species. The Crystalline Republic spent centuries developing defenses against the Void Wraiths. When the Wraiths evolved past those defenses, 47 worlds fell in a single day." Stood and walked to his window, looking out at the bustling commerce of Nexus Station. "The galaxy is full of species that thought they had solved their problems permanently. Most of them are extinct now. So your solution is to make extinction itself permanent." "My solution is to ensure that when we eliminate a threat, it stays eliminated." Turned back to face the Ambassador. "Tell me, Ambassador, would you prefer that the galactic predators had simply been driven back beyond the rim? Would you sleep better knowing that they were out there somewhere, evolving, adapting, waiting for another opportunity to return?" Ash's skin flickered between shades of blue and purple. There must be alternatives. Containment, relocation, genetic modification to reduce their aggressive tendencies. All of which assume that the threat is willing to cooperate with your preferred solution, interrupted. These creatures weren't interested in coexistence, Ambassador. They were biological weapons designed to consume other species. The only choice was elimination or extinction. But your methods, Commander? What you did to those creatures could theoretically be done to any species, including yours. There it was, the real reason for the visit. Had been wondering when someone would finally voice the question that the entire galaxy was thinking. Are you asking if humans are planning to eliminate other species, Ambassador? I'm asking what safeguards exist to prevent such actions. Returned to his desk and activated a holographic display showing the Terran Extinction Corps operational history. 2 centuries of contracts, mission reports, and statistical analyses filled the air between them. These are every extinction operation we've conducted since joining the Galactic community, explained. Note the client species, the target species, and the nature of the threat in each case. Ash studied the data, his skin shifting through various shades as he processed the information. Every single target species was designated as an existential threat to galactic civilization, continued. Biological weapons, technological plagues, predatory species with exponential reproduction rates, energy parasites that consumed entire star systems. In every case, conventional military action had failed, and the threat was spreading beyond the ability of galactic forces to contain. But who makes the determination that a species constitutes an existential threat? The client species, in consultation with the Galactic Threat Assessment Council. Humans don't choose our targets, Ambassador. We're contractors, not conquerors. Ash's attention focused on one particular entry in the data. What about the collective? According to this, they hired you to eliminate a species called the data worms. Sentient computer viruses that had evolved beyond their original programming. They were consuming entire planetary networks and had begun targeting biological neural systems. The collective's entire civilization was based on biotechnological integration. If the data worms had succeeded in adapting to organic systems, it would have meant the extinction of over 4 billion. But surely there were alternatives to complete elimination. Pulled up the detailed mission file. The collective tried digital containment, air-gapped systems, electromagnetic pulse weapons, quantum encryption, and biological firewalls. The data worms adapted to each countermeasure within hours. When we were contracted, they had already consumed the central governing networks of 3 major worlds and were preparing to jump to biological targets. So you eliminated them completely. We developed a quantum virus that specifically targeted their digital consciousness patterns. Within 12 hours, every data worm in the galaxy had been deleted at the fundamental level. The threat was ended permanently. Ash was quiet for a long moment, studying the mission data. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of reluctant understanding. I see the necessity in each individual case, Commander. What concerns the collective is the broader implications of your capabilities. Such as the fact that your species has developed the ability to eliminate any biological or technological threat with perfect efficiency and no advance warning. The power to delete entire species from existence at the quantum level is unprecedented in galactic history. Nodded, it is, and that's exactly why we're so careful about how we use it. But what happens if humanity decides that another species poses a threat to your interests? What if you determine that the galaxy would be safer without or any other major power? Ambassador, let me share something with you that might provide some perspective. Activated another display, this one showing a detailed analysis of human military capabilities compared to other galactic species. According to our own intelligence estimates, humanity could eliminate every other sentient species in the galaxy within approximately 6 months if we chose to do so. We have the technology, the strategic knowledge, and the operational capacity to make the entire galaxy uninhabitable for non-human life. Ash's skin went completely white, a color recognized as indicating shock or terror. We've had this capability for over a century, continued. And in all that time, we've used it exclusively to eliminate threats to galactic civilization as a whole, never to advance human interests or eliminate potential rivals. But why? Ash's voice was barely above a whisper. With that kind of power, you could rule the entire galaxy. Because ruling the galaxy wasn't our goal, replied. Ambassador, humans entered the galactic community as a minor species with primitive technology and no significant military power. We could have tried to build conventional fleets, develop traditional weapons, and compete with established powers on their own terms. Instead, we focused on solving problems that no one else could solve. By developing extinction technologies. By developing solutions. The fact that those solutions often involve extinction is a consequence of the nature of the problems, not our preferred method of operation. Deactivated the displays and returned his attention to the ambassador. Ambassador, let me ask you a direct question. Do you believe that the galaxy is safer or less safe because the galactic predators no longer exist? Safer, Ash admitted. Do you believe that the collective would still exist if the data worms had not been eliminated? No. Do you believe that any of the 48 species we've eliminated could have been stopped through conventional military action? Ash was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. Then you understand why we do what we do, even if you're uncomfortable with how we do it. The ambassador's skin slowly returned to a more normal blue shade. Commander, I think I'm beginning to understand the human perspective, but I still have concerns about the concentration of such power in a single species. So do we, replied. That's why we maintain strict operational protocols, require external authorization for all extinction operations, and submit to regular oversight from the Galactic Threat Assessment Council. But those safeguards are voluntary. You could ignore them at any time. Yes, we could, just as any species with sufficient military power could choose to ignore galactic law and conquer their neighbors. The difference is that we've chosen not to. Stood and walked to a wall display showing the current political map of the galaxy. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, countless different forms of life all coexisting in a complex web of diplomatic and economic relationships. Ambassador, humanity learned something important in our early history. Power without restraint inevitably destroys the wielder. We've watched species throughout the galaxy make the mistake of using their abilities to dominate others. They always fall eventually, brought down by the very power they thought made them invincible. So you choose restraint. We choose sustainability. The galaxy is a complex system, Ambassador. Remove too many variables and the whole thing collapses. Humanity's role is to eliminate the variables that threaten the system's stability, not to control the system itself. Ash stood, his skin now showing the lighter blue that indicated thoughtful consideration. Commander, I came here expecting to find a species drunk on its own power, convinced of its superiority and indifferent to the concerns of others. And instead, I found a species that understands power better than most and has chosen to use it responsibly. He paused. That may be even more unsettling than what I expected to find. Smiled for the first time during the conversation. Ambassador, if it makes you feel any better, most of us find it unsettling too. No one wants to be the species that has to make decisions about which other species get to continue existing. But someone has to make those decisions. Unfortunately, yes. And until someone else develops the capability to do it as efficiently and with as little collateral damage as we can, that responsibility falls to us. Ash moved toward the door, then stopped. Commander, one final question. What would it take for humanity to target another major galactic power for extinction? His expression became serious. Ambassador, in 2 centuries of extinction operations, we have never targeted a species for political, economic, or territorial reasons. We have only acted against existential threats to galactic civilization. But hypothetically, any species that developed the capability and demonstrated the intent to eliminate all other life in the galaxy would become a legitimate target for extinction. That's the line we've drawn, and it's the only line that matters to us. And if that species was humanity itself, was quiet for a long moment, then we would expect someone else to stop us just as we've stopped others. The responsibility cuts both ways, Ambassador. Ash nodded slowly. Thank you for your candor, Commander. This conversation has been illuminating. After the ambassador left, returned to his desk and activated his personal communication system. Within minutes, he was connected to Terran Command. "Sir," the duty officer's image appeared on his display. "How did the meeting go?" "As expected, the galaxy is starting to ask the hard questions about our capabilities and intentions. Are we ready for that conversation?" Looked out at Nexus Station, where hundreds of different species were conducting commerce, sharing technology, and building the complex relationships that held galactic civilization together 6 months after the extinction of the galactic predators. The aftermath was still reverberating through the political structures of the galaxy. What had begun as a routine extermination contract had evolved into something far more significant: the first formal review of human extinction capabilities by the Galactic Senate. Commander found himself standing before representatives of over 300 species in the Great Assembly Hall on Galactic Prime, the political heart of the galactic community. The hall was a masterwork of engineering, designed to accommodate the vast biological diversity of galactic civilization. Environmental zones maintained different atmospheric conditions, gravity fields, and lighting spectra to ensure that every species could participate comfortably. "Was not comfortable, Commander," announced the speaker, an ancient whose ceremonial robes marked him as one of the highest-ranking diplomatic figures in the galaxy. "You appear before this assembly to provide testimony regarding the methods and capabilities of the Terran Extinction Corps." "I understand," replied, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems that rendered his words comprehensible to hundreds of different species. The chair recognizes Senator of the Defense Coalition. Admiral, now wearing the ceremonial armor of her senatorial office, stood at her species-designated section of the assembly. Her 4 arms moved in the formal gestures of parliamentary protocol as she spoke. "Commander, the Coalition has reviewed the tactical data from your recent operation. We find ourselves compelled to ask, how long has humanity possessed the capability for instantaneous species extinction across galactic distances?" Had prepared for this question. "Senator, humans have been developing extinction technologies for approximately 130 years. The current level of capability has been achieved gradually through continuous research and development. And during that time, have you other galactic powers of your advancing capabilities?" "No, Senator. Our research was conducted internally and classified for security reasons." A wave of agitation rippled through the assembly. Various species began communicating in their native languages, creating a cacophony of sounds that the translation systems struggled to process. "Order," the speaker called. The chair recognizes Senator or of the Hegemony Coalition. The Hegemony representative was a massive crystalline being whose body reflected light in patterns that conveyed meaning to those who understood their language. The translation systems rendered their communication as a series of musical tones. "Commander, the Hegemony has existed for over 5. In that time, we have witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, the development of terrible weapons, and the emergence of threats that comprehension. Yet we have never encountered a species with the demonstrated ability to eliminate biological threats across such vast distances with such precision and speed." "What is your question, Senator?" "Our question is whether humanity views itself as the galaxy's appointed guardian, with the right to determine which species deserve to exist." Considered his response carefully. This was the heart of the matter, the question that had been building since humanity first demonstrated their extinction capabilities. "Senator, humanity does not view itself as anyone's guardian. We are contractors who specialize in solving problems that cannot be addressed through conventional means. In every case, we have acted at the request of galactic powers facing existential threats." "But the capability exists for you to act unilaterally," pressed Senator Orr. "You could eliminate any species without warning, without justification, without oversight." "Yes," replied simply, "we could." The assembly fell silent. Submission hung in the air like a physical presence, forcing every representative to confront the reality of human capabilities. "However," continued, "the same could be said of any sufficiently advanced military force. They could glass entire worlds with their fleet. The crystalline republics could disrupt star systems with their reality manipulation technology. The Void Walkers could delete entire sectors from existence using dimensional warfare." But none of those capabilities approach the scope and efficiency of human extinction methods, Senator pointed out. Our weapons require fleets, preparation time, massive resource commitments. Your methods require a single ship and can be deployed without warning against any target. That's true, acknowledged. And that's exactly why we've chosen to use these capabilities exclusively for eliminating existential threats to galactic civilization. The speaker called for a recess, during which various coalitions of species huddled together in intense discussion. Remained at the witness podium, flanked by 2 diplomatic escorts from the Terran embassy. He could see Ambassador Ash in the gallery, watching the proceedings with a kind of intense focus that suggested he was analyzing every word for deeper meaning. When the assembly reconvened, the speaker recognized Senator Al of the Outer Rim territories. "Commander," the senator began, their reptilian features arranged in an expression of careful neutrality. "The Outer Rim has been the recipient of human extinction services on multiple occasions. In each case, you have successfully eliminated threats that our conventional forces could not contain. We acknowledge the effectiveness of your methods." "Thank you, Senator. However, we must also acknowledge that your capabilities represent an unprecedented concentration of power. The question before this assembly is whether the galactic community can accept the existence of such power without formal oversight and regulation." "Senator, what form of oversight do you envision?" "The establishment of a galactic extinction authority with representatives from major powers that would review and authorize all extinction operations. No species would be eliminated without formal approval from the authority." Shook his head. "Senator, with respect, such an authority would be unable to respond quickly enough to existential threats. The galactic predators killed over 20 million beings and eliminated multiple colonies before we were even contracted to deal with them. A formal review process would have added weeks or months to our response time." "Better a slower response than the risk of unauthorized extinctions," Senator Al replied. "Senator, let me ask you a direct question," said. "How many of your people would you be willing to sacrifice to bureaucratic delays if another existential threat emerged tomorrow?" The question struck at the heart of the dilemma facing the assembly. Every species present had experienced the relief of watching an impossible threat simply disappear thanks to human intervention. But that same intervention demonstrated capabilities that made conventional military power seem almost irrelevant. The speaker recognized Senator Eth of the Core Worlds Alliance, the elderly who had originally authorized the deployment of human forces against the galactic predators. "Commander," Eth began, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries of military experience, "I have reviewed the tactical data from 47 of your extinction operations. In each case, your methods were precise, efficient, and resulted in zero collateral damage to non-target species." "That is correct, Senator. I have also reviewed intelligence estimates regarding human military capabilities. According to our analysis, humanity could indeed eliminate every other sentient species in the galaxy within months if you chose to do so." "Our estimates suggest 6 months," confirmed, though we've never tested the timeline. Another wave of agitation swept through the assembly. Several species began broadcasting on emergency frequencies, likely updating their home governments on the proceedings. "Commander," Eth continued, "given this capability, why has humanity chosen to remain a minor power in galactic politics? Why not use your advantages to claim territory, resources, or political control?" Had been expecting this question as well. It was the logical next step in the conversation that Ash had begun months earlier. "Senator, humanity learned something important about power during our early history. The species that survive and thrive are not necessarily the ones with the most powerful weapons. They are the ones that understand how to use power sustainably." "Explain." "In human history, we have observed countless examples of powers that became so focused on demonstrating their strength that they forgot to build sustainable relationships with others. They conquered, controlled, and dominated until they created so much resentment and resistance that their own power became the source of their destruction." Gestured toward the assembly. "This galactic community represents the cooperation of hundreds of species, each contributing their unique capabilities to the common good. Humans contribute extinction services, they provide military expertise. The crystalline republics offer technological innovation. The Void Walkers maintain dimensional stability. And if humanity chose to dominate rather than cooperate, we would destroy the very system that makes our existence valuable, replied. A galaxy under human control would be a galaxy without diversity, without innovation, without the complex relationships that drive progress. We would rule over a stagnant empire that would eventually collapse under its own weight. Senator Eth was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of understanding. So you choose cooperation over domination not from altruism, but from enlightened self-interest. Precisely. Humanity thrives in a diverse galaxy. We have no interest in ruling a homogeneous empire. The speaker called for another recess, this one lasting several hours as various species coalitions met to discuss their positions. When the assembly reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. The initial hostility and suspicion had been replaced by something closer to wary acceptance. Commander, the speaker announced, this assembly has reached a consensus regarding human extinction capabilities. Waited. The assembled representatives acknowledged that human extinction methods have proven invaluable in protecting galactic civilization from existential threats. We also acknowledge that formal oversight of these capabilities would likely reduce their effectiveness in emergency situations. However, the speaker continued, the concentration of such power requires some form of accountability. Therefore, this assembly hereby establishes the Galactic Threat Assessment Council, with representatives from 12 major species coalitions. This council will maintain oversight of extinction operations, not to approve or disapprove specific actions, but to ensure that human capabilities are used consistently with their stated purpose. Considered the proposal. It was more reasonable than he had expected, creating oversight without crippling operational effectiveness. The Terran Extinction Corps accepts the authority of the Galactic Threat Assessment Council, he said formally. Furthermore, the speaker continued, this assembly formally recognizes humanity's unique role in galactic defense and requests that the Terran government establish a permanent embassy for extinction affairs to facilitate communication and coordination regarding future threats. I will convey this request to my government. Finally, this assembly directs that all extinction operations be documented in detail for historical review, to ensure that future generations understand both the necessity and the methods of these actions. Nodded, understood. As the formal session concluded and representatives began filing out of the assembly hall, found himself approached by Senator. Commander, she said, I owe you an apology. When we first contracted your services, I viewed humans as little more than effective barbarians. I understand now that you are something far more sophisticated. What's that, Senator? Gardeners, she replied. You tend the garden of galactic civilization by removing the weeds that threaten to strangle everything else. Smiled slightly. That's probably the most poetic description of extinction work I've ever heard. Will you accept the Council's oversight? We already have, Senator, but I think you'll find that our operational methods won't change significantly. We've been self-regulating for over a century. The Council will mostly be observing what we were already doing. As left the assembly hall, he reflected on the day's proceedings. The galaxy had confronted the reality of human capabilities and chosen to accept them rather than resist them. It was a mature response from a collection of species that had learned to value stability over ideology, but knew that this was only the beginning. The galactic community had acknowledged human power and agreed to work with it. The real test would come the next time an existential threat emerged, when the galaxy would discover whether humans could maintain their restraint while operating under formal oversight. Suspected they would pass that test as well. After all, humans had been restraining themselves for over a century without any external pressure. Adding formal oversight would change the paperwork, but it wouldn't change the fundamental reality that humanity's survival depended on maintaining the complex web of relationships that made galactic civilization possible. 2 years after the establishment of the Galactic Threat Assessment Council, the first major test of the new oversight system arrived in the form of something unprecedented, a threat that originated from within the galactic community itself. Commander stood in the emergency session chamber of the Council, surrounded by holographic representatives of 12 major species coalitions. The situation was unlike anything they had faced before, and the tension in the room was palpable even through the artificial environment systems. "Explain the situation again," requested Counselor Ash, now serving as the representative to the council. Dr. Sarah, now serving as the official liaison between the Terran Extinction Corps and the council, activated the central display. 18 hours ago, automated monitoring systems detected an unprecedented biological anomaly in the Arcturus sector. Initial investigation revealed that the research collective has been conducting unauthorized experiments in accelerated evolution. The display showed footage from the research facility, massive biotanks containing creatures that classification. They appeared to be combinations of multiple species, engineered for maximum adaptability and aggression. "They have been attempting to create the perfect biological weapon," Doctor continued. "They've taken genetic material from 17 different apex predator species, including samples recovered from several extinct species that we eliminated over the past century." Counselor of the Hegemony Coalition shifted his crystalline form, creating harmonic tones that expressed dismay. "Are you saying they've been experimenting with genetic material from species that humanity eliminated?" "Yes, including samples from the galactic predators that started this whole situation." A wave of shocked communication rippled through the council chamber. The idea of deliberately recreating extinct threats was so fundamentally dangerous that most species had never even considered the possibility. "What is the current status of these experiments?" asked Counselor. "Containment failure occurred 6 hours ago," replied, speaking for the first time during the briefing. "The experimental creatures have broken free of the facility and are currently consuming everything within a 50-kilometer radius. They're adapting to countermeasures in real time and reproducing exponentially." "How many creatures are we talking about?" asked Counselor Morzeth of the Outer Rim Coalition. "Current estimates suggest approximately 12,000 individual organisms, with the population doubling every 4 hours. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives processed this information. 12,000 creatures that combine the worst traits of 17 different apex predator species, growing stronger and more numerous by the hour. "What are they doing about this situation?" Counselor Ash asked. "They've evacuated their research staff and are attempting to contain the outbreak using conventional military forces," Doctor replied. "So far, they've lost 3 full regiments, and the creatures have adapted to all their weapons systems. And they haven't requested assistance." His expression darkened. "The government is denying that the situation exists. According to their official statements, they're conducting routine military exercises in the Arcturus sector." "They're covering it up," Counselor said, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "While their creations consume everything in an ever-expanding radius," confirmed. "At current growth rates, the creatures will reach inhabited worlds within 72 hours. Counselor Ash leaned forward in his chair. "Commander, what is your assessment of the threat level?" Activated his personal data pad and transmitted a detailed analysis to the Council's central systems. "Based on current behavioral patterns, these creatures represent an existential threat to all biological life within a 1,000-light-year radius. They've been engineered with the adaptive capabilities of the galactic predators, the reproductive rate of void wraiths, and the energy absorption capabilities of quantum parasites. In other words," Doctor added, "they're potentially worse than any single threat we've eliminated in the past. Because they're a deliberate combination of all the worst traits we've encountered," finished. The council members began communicating among themselves in their native languages, creating a chaotic mix of sounds and electromagnetic signals. Finally, Counselor Ash called for order. "The situation appears clear," he announced. "We have an existential threat created by a member species that is refusing to acknowledge its existence or request assistance. The question is whether the Council has the authority to authorize intervention against the will of a sovereign government." "The collective is a member of the galactic community in good standing," pointed out Counselor. "They have the right to handle internal affairs without outside interference." "Not when those internal affairs threaten to consume neighboring star systems," Counselor replied sharply. "The protocols are clear," said Counselor Morzeth. "Extinction operations require either a formal request from the affected species or a unanimous vote of the Council declaring an existential threat to galactic civilization. Do we have unanimous agreement that these creatures represent such a threat? Ash asked. One by one, each Council member voted affirmatively. Even the representatives of species that had traditionally opposed human intervention acknowledged that the situation required immediate action. Commander, Ash announced formally, the Galactic Threat Assessment Council hereby authorizes the immediate extinction of all experimental organisms created by the research collective, along with any genetic material, research data, or breeding populations associated with the project. Understood, replied. We'll begin deployment immediately. Commander, Counselor interjected, what about the government's refusal to cooperate? His expression became cold. Counselor, the creatures don't care about political boundaries. If the government chooses to interfere with extinction operations, they'll be treated as a hostile force protecting an existential threat. Are you saying you would take action against the military? I'm saying that nothing will be allowed to interfere with the elimination of this threat. The Council has authorized complete extinction, and that's exactly what you'll get. Within hours, the inevitable had arrived in the Arcturus sector, accompanied by 2 additional human vessels, the Finality and the Last Resort. The small human fleet represented more destructive capability than most species possessed in their entire naval forces, though the ships themselves still looked like they had been assembled from spare parts. The government had responded to the human arrival by deploying their 7th battle fleet to intercept them. 23 heavy cruisers, 12 dreadnoughts, and 47 escort vessels arranged themselves in a defensive formation around their research facility. Attention human vessels, came a transmission from the flagship. You are in violation of collective sovereignty. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Opened a channel to the commander. Attention forces. Your experimental organisms have been designated for extinction by the Galactic Threat Assessment Council. Stand down and allow us to complete our mission. We recognize no authority over collective internal affairs. Your presence here is an act of war. Side, the political complications were going to make this operation significantly more complex than a simple extinction mission. Doctor, he called to his, current status of the target organisms. Population has reached approximately 48,000 individuals. They've consumed all organic matter within a 200-kilometer radius and are beginning to spread beyond the planet's atmosphere. Time to planetary saturation. 36 hours. Once they achieve planetary saturation, they'll begin launching themselves toward neighboring systems. Made his decision. All human vessels initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was humanity's solution for dealing with interference during extinction operations. It was also the reason that most species preferred not to test human resolve directly. The 3 human ships simply vanished from conventional sensors. To the fleet, it appeared that the humans had retreated, unwilling to face superior numbers. That illusion lasted approximately 30 seconds. The flagship suddenly found itself unable to move. Its engines, weapon systems, navigation computers, and life support all ceased functioning simultaneously. One by one, the other ships in the fleet experienced the same mysterious failures. Within minutes, the entire battle fleet was floating dead in space. This is Commander to the fleet, came the transmission. Your ships have been disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are unharmed. Do not attempt to interfere with our operations. What have you done to us? The commander demanded. We've introduced a targeted nanoplague to your ship systems. It's specifically designed to disable technology without affecting biological systems. Your crews will be fine, but your ships are temporarily inoperable. You're attacking a sovereign military force. We're removing an obstacle to the elimination of an existential threat, corrected. Your ships will be fully functional again once our mission is complete. The human vessels reappeared on sensors, now moving directly toward the planet where the experimental creatures were spreading. The forces could only watch helplessly as the humans began their work. What followed was the most complex extinction operation humanity had ever attempted. The creatures had been deliberately designed to resist elimination, combining adaptive capabilities that would have made each individual trait nearly impossible to overcome. Doctor and her team worked frantically to develop countermeasures while the creatures continued to multiply and spread. They tried targeted viruses, quantum disruption fields, genetic cascade weapons, and temporal displacement devices. Each method showed initial success before the creatures adapted and developed immunity. "They're learning faster than we can develop new approaches," Doctor reported after 18 hours of continuous effort. "Every time we eliminate a portion of the population, the survivors adapt and pass their immunity to their offspring." "How many creatures are we dealing with now?" asked. "Over 2 million individuals across 4 planets. They're beginning to construct primitive spacecraft using consumed organic matter." Stared at the tactical display, watching red dots representing the experimental creatures spreading across the star system like a plague. Each dot represented thousands of organisms that had been specifically designed to overcome the methods humanity used to eliminate threats. "Sir," reported technical specialist, "I have an idea, but it's going to require authorization for a Class Omega operation." Turned to face his subordinate. Class Omega operations were theoretical extinction methods that humanity had developed but never used. They were considered too extreme, too final, too dangerous for any conceivable situation. "Explain." "The creatures adapt by analyzing and incorporating the methods used against them. They're essentially learning from our attacks and developing countermeasures. But what if we attack them with something that can't be analyzed or adapted to?" "Such as?" "Conceptual deletion. Instead of attacking their biological systems, we attack the idea of their existence at the quantum level. We don't kill them. We convince reality that they never existed in the first place." Doctor looked up from her workstation. "That's theoretically possible, but the collateral effects could be unpredictable. We'd be editing past events to ensure these creatures were never created." "Which would also delete all record of the research that created them," continued, "along with any other experiments based on the same principles." Considered the implications. Conceptual deletion would indeed eliminate the creatures completely, but it would also erase the scientific knowledge that had led to their creation. Future researchers wouldn't be able to learn from the mistakes because the mistakes would never have happened. "What about the research facility and the scientists who created them?" he asked. "Gone," admitted, "along with anyone who died as a result of the containment failure. If the creatures never existed, then the people they killed would never have died." It was the ultimate solution, not just eliminating the threat, but erasing it from history so completely that it would never have existed to threaten anyone. But it would also erase the lesson that the threat's existence had taught. Activated his communication system and connected to the council chamber. "Counselor Ash," he said when the ambassador's image appeared, "we have a solution to the situation, but it requires authorization for methods that humanity has never used before." "Explain." "Conceptual deletion. We would edit the timeline to ensure that the experimental creatures never existed. Complete elimination with zero possibility of recurrence or adaptation." Ash was quiet for a long moment. "What are the consequences of such an action?" "Everyone and everything associated with the project would be erased from history. The research, the scientists, the knowledge that led to their creation, all of it would simply never have happened. And the people who died when the creatures broke containment would be restored to life because the event that killed them would never have occurred." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Humanity had developed the ability not just to eliminate threats, but to reach backward through time and prevent them from ever existing. "Commander," Ash said finally, "the Council needs to discuss this matter." "You have 6 hours," replied. "After that, the creatures will have spread beyond our ability to contain them through any method." The Council's debate was brief but intense. In the end, they reached a unanimous decision: authorize the conceptual deletion, but establish strict protocols to ensure that such methods would never be used except in the most extreme circumstances. When received the authorization, he immediately began implementation of Class Omega protocols. The process was unlike anything humanity had attempted before, requiring precise manipulation of quantum probability fields to convince the universe that a different set of events had occurred. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, the Arcturus sector was overrun with experimental creatures that threatened galactic civilization. The next moment, the creatures had never existed. The research facility was gone. The scientists who had created the creatures were working on entirely different projects. The containment failure had never happened. Even the battle fleet that had tried to interfere with the operation found their ships mysteriously restored to full functionality, though their crews retained vague memories of encountering human forces under circumstances they couldn't quite recall. "Extinction complete," Doctor reported, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "All traces of the target organisms have been eliminated from current reality and historical record." Nodded, but he was troubled by the implications of what they had just accomplished. Humanity had crossed a line that even he had never expected to approach. They had demonstrated the ability not just to eliminate threats, but to rewrite history itself. "Sir," said quietly, "should we report the full details of this operation to the Council?" Considered the question. The Council had authorized the operation, but they might not fully understand what they had authorized. Conceptual deletion was a power that went beyond extinction. It was the ability to edit reality itself. "We report that the threat was eliminated completely and permanently," he said finally. "The specific methods remain classified." As the inevitable departed the Arcturus sector, found himself thinking about the conversation he had had with Ambassador Ash years earlier. They had discussed the concentration of power in human hands and the safeguards that prevented abuse of that power. Now humanity had demonstrated capabilities that went beyond anything the galaxy had imagined possible. The question was whether they could continue to exercise restraint when they possessed the power to rewrite history itself. Suspected that this operation would not be the last time humanity faced such a choice. And each time, the temptation to use ultimate solutions for lesser problems would grow stronger. The galaxy had chosen. The galaxy had chosen cooperation over confrontation. Now it remained to be seen whether that choice would prove wise when the next impossible threat emerged from the darkness between the stars ether. "We'd better be," he said, "because ready or not, it's already begun." And in a galaxy full of threats that conventional solutions, that made humans very valuable allies indeed. The transmission ended, leaving admirals staring at a battlefield full of dead predators and wondering what exactly the Galactic Defense Force had just unleashed upon the galaxy.